G'day guys, my name is CJ. Hope you're all staying safe and washing those hands. This is the iPhone SE of 2020 and it's vastly divided opinions ever since it was announced. On one hand, it's one of the cheapest iPhones in recent times at 749 Australian dollars or 499 US dollars for the base 64 gig model. On the other hand, it's recycling a design almost 5 years old. So does this phone have a place in 2020? Let's take a look. So let's start with the outside. As we know, the iPhone SE recycles the exact same design as the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 7, 6S, and 6 before it. There's a curved, soft touch aluminium frame with nice tactile buttons on the sides, legacy lightning port on the bottom, and no headphone jack either. Surprise, surprise. There's glass on the front and back with massive bezels housing its 4.7-inch 720p LCD display, which for the record is still an excellent screen with excellent color accuracy and viewing angles. Sure, it's not as bright as the iPhone 11 screen, but for general purpose use and even casual movie watching or gaming, it's perfectly fine. Pixel density is obviously not as high either, and if you really look closely, you can see individual pixels. But if we're going to be going by the same principles for a Retina screen, it's still going to be plenty smooth and sharp enough. Below the screen is also the classic pressure-sensitive Touch ID sensor, a feature that I refreshingly missed when going back to a bezel-less device like the iPhone 11 Pro. The iPhone SE in 2020 comes in 3 colors, black, white, and red, and they've also moved the Apple logo down to the middle, bringing it in line with the rest of the current models. It also gives it a much cleaner look, which I love. And I also love the fact that the screen also comes in black, so this white version that I've been using reminds me a lot of the old white iPhone 3G, with white on the back, black on the front. It's super clean and elegant. I love it. What I've also enjoyed using is the size. While it's not the same small slab that we saw with the previous SE, it's a far more handleable device compared to some of the 6-inch beasts that are the norm these days. In some ways, the 11 and the 11 Pro smaller models have a similar footprint, but I think the smaller battery cell, for better or for worse, and thinner body actually make it feel smaller than it actually is. And then what isn't small though is performance, so let's talk about that. The SE rocks the same A13 Bionic chip that we see in the iPhone 11 and Pro models, and from what we can see, there's no major downclocking of the processor, so when combined with a lower resolution screen, you've got a device that absolutely flies. I mean, this shouldn't really come as a surprise anymore with iPhones in general, but there's no lag and no real difference that I can see between both the 11 Pro and the SE with general use. It's got all the software benefits that other iPhones have as well, like iMessage, FaceTime, AirDrop, and regular software updates, which are pretty important. But the main differences was in the UI experience with the SE compared to the 11. And that's pretty unsurprising. With certain features, it did take some getting used to, such as going back to swiping up from the bottom to get to Control Center. Overall, it just really surprised me how used to full screen navigation I had become. So do be mindful of this if you're going back to an SE from something like an iPhone 10. But overall, it still felt really natural to use, and having a home button to physically press was really great. It's a more natural way to use something like Apple Pay, where you can just double press and off you go. And you really forget how good these fingerprint sensors have become when you compare to some of the in-screen solutions we've got today. It feels just as, if not more, natural as Face ID by picking up the phone, pressing the home button, and unlocking it all in one motion. The closest any device has come to this experience is Google Pixel's Face ID, which is still the best version of Face ID to date. So the Touch ID button was a refreshing jab of nostalgia, but overall a feature I'm happy to sacrifice for more screen real estate, and a feature I'll quickly forget again when I go back to a full screen device. But what we won't forget though is to talk about cameras, one of the most important features in any smartphone. From what we know, the iPhone SE seems to have the exact same hardware as the iPhone 8 with a single 12 megapixel standard wide angle lens. Photos taken with this camera are actually really good. A lot of the photos I took with the SE compared really well with the iPhone 11 Pro, at least in good lighting, and that's key. Details, color, and dynamic range all looked excellent and very iPhone in character. It's got a great balance of detail, contrast, and dynamic range. Just be careful when shooting subjects that are brightly lit in the background, as shooting directly towards light can lead to some flaring. This is something you don't see so much in newer hardware like the iPhone 11 Pro, and it just shows how reliant smartphones are on the processor in producing great photos these days. Another example is in portrait mode photography, where it handles this really well without another lens for depth information, kind of like how the Pixel phones have been handling portrait mode for years. So you get good background separation that doesn't look too unnatural, with the only real caveat being that it only works with people. So furry friends and inanimate objects aren't invited to the party, sadly. But this is all in software processing, so it could change in the future with some software updates, but I wouldn't hold my breath. And with this, you'd assume because it's got the A13 processor, it would also have an inbuilt night mode as well. But you'd be wrong. Low light is really where the iPhone SE suffers, and I don't know if night mode is something Apple has purposely not included to give another point of differentiation for the other phones, or if it's a true hardware limitation. In any case, low light photos overall aren't exciting. They're dull, they're pretty average in quality, and largely unusable when you compare them to newer phones with newer hardware. If it had an equivalent night mode, then that really would have been the icing on an already really sweet cake. What it doesn't suffer though is in video capture. We're all starting to sound like broken records now, but the iPhone SE, like the other iPhones, have excellent video shooting. It shoots up to 4K 60 frames per second and slow motion up to 240 frames at 1080p resolution. And when you look at quality, it's still at Apple's class-leading levels with excellent stabilization, detail, color, and dynamic range. In fact, it sits above all other Androids in terms of video quality. That's including flagship models like the S20. So that's one very big win for the SE. But what isn't a big win is in battery life. And I guess to keep it small, it maintains a battery size of over 1820 milliamps. And while the A13 processor is more efficient compared to its older models, you really can't get around the limitations of physical size, and you're gonna feel it with the iPhone SE. For majority of users that Apple are targeting the SE at, this probably won't be a major issue. I mean, if all you're going to be doing is a bit of iMessage, casual web browsing, social media browsing, work calls here and there, it's going to be perfectly fine and easily last a full day. It also has Apple's great standby battery life too, and if you've got wireless chargers sitting around the place, you can just plonk it on there and give it small top-ups throughout the day, so it's not going to be a major problem. However, with processor-heavy functions like gaming or doing a lot of photography or video shooting, then the SE really does suffer. Battery life drops off a cliff, and you do need to juice up at least once, twice, maybe even 3 times a day. So if this is you, maybe look elsewhere because this won't be suitable, and you're probably not who Apple is targeting with this phone anyway. And this is what the question about the iPhone SE really boils down to. Is there a role for this phone, and who is it actually for? Now for me, the iPhone SE is a people's iPhone. An iPhone for everyday people who don't get caught up in the hype of new technology. It's for people who don't care about having an OLED bezel-less screen with a 90% screen to body ratio or 5 cameras and an 100 megapixel sensor. Ultimately, it's a utilitarian device for people who just want a reliable, cheap, and functional phone that'll keep them connected with the things and people most important to them. A device that almost gets out of the way and will be supported in the future if needed. And because of the A13 processor, you know this phone will be supported at least 3, if not 4, maybe even 5 years into the future, which is massive for a lot of people. The iPhone has and always will be a phone that divides opinion amongst the tech community. That can't be denied. But what also can't be denied is Apple's ecosystem. It's unmatched worldwide. Again, for better or for worse. And it'll be pivotal in the SE's success. And I'm sure one or more of your family members are iPhone users. And being able to easily connect with one another is massive, especially during these difficult pandemic times. Just a tap or two and you can FaceTime with a loved one on the other side of the country or the world. And there's never been a more important time to remain connected. And of course, Android can do all of that too, but for those who don't give a toss about tech, it's certainly easier within Apple's unified ecosystem. It's one of the few unique positions that allows Apple to release a phone like the SE, it's almost a phone that's almost 5 years old, and still succeed. Because we all know deep down that if there was another company like Samsung, who released a Galaxy S7 with a Snapdragon 865 and slapped a $750 price on it, it probably won't sell anywhere near as many units. Or maybe they should release a Note 7 with a Snapdragon 865. Now that would really be something. So long as there are people who don't care about the latest technology and just want a phone that works in Apple's ecosystem, will keep them connected, be supported and won't break the bank, then this iPhone SE will always have a place. And because of that, I think it's going to sell incredibly well and be one of the most important phones of 2020. Just get the 128GB model. 64 gigs won't get you very far over 3-4 years. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, subscribe for more, and ding the bell icon so you don't miss out. Stay safe out there guys, keep washing those hands, and I'll see you in the next one. And of course, say good day to your mum for me. Cheers.